Blueprints work best when you need to structure large processes and when you need everybody on a team to follow the same set of steps. One of the best things about blueprints is that they make it easier to teach your team how to use an application, and they make it easy to make sure that everybody is following the same process. For example, a blueprint could work really well for a structured sales process, where every salesperson has to go through the same set of steps, where they maybe start with qualifying a customer and gathering information about them, then move on to sending a proposal and eventually closing a deal. Another example of how people commonly use blueprints is for a hiring process. So they might need to review a bunch of resumes and then pass those along to hiring managers, schedule a few rounds of interviews, and then finally choose who they're going to hire and send them a job offer. When you create blueprints, you plan every step in your process out in advance, and you can control which actions are available at every step. These actions are called transitions. Every transition that you add to a blueprint becomes a button that your team can click, which allows them to move from one stage onto the next. In this example blueprint, clicking the Negotiate Terms transition moves from the proposal stage all the way to the Negotiate/Review stage, also called a state. States are the stage or status of a record as it moves through your blueprint. In a sales process, that could mean the stage that a deal is at or the status of a customer. When you build a blueprint, you start by laying out all of the states in chronological order first. Then you add in transitions that allow your team to move from one state onto the next. You can control what happens before, during, and after each of the transitions in your blueprint. In the Before area, you can choose which users or roles are allowed to click this transition. You can use this option to make some steps accessible only to managers. During controls what happens immediately after someone clicks a transition. You can do things like make it mandatory to upload an attachment, add notes, or fill out certain fields at a particular step in your process. You can also add messages explaining what to do, or require sales reps to add a task before moving on. After lets you automate those same types of actions. So instead of making a team member manually add a task or update something, you can just do it automatically in the background. This is especially useful for sending template emails or updating records. Now some tips for building blueprints. It's important to be able to build blueprints that are flexible enough to be able to handle exceptions. Sometimes you might need to be able to skip a step in a process, or you might need to have certain transitions that are available at a bunch of different stages. For example, in sales, you could mark a deal as won or lost at any step of the selling process. To handle exceptions like these, you can mark some transitions as common transitions. That will just make them available at multiple steps along the blueprint. Remembering to account for things like this can be kind of difficult, so it might take some trial and error before you're used to it. Sometimes the same process won't apply in every situation. For example, in sales, you might have a different selling process for selling goods versus your process that you use for selling services. For cases like this, you can add criteria onto your blueprints, and that just says that certain records should enter one blueprint and certain other records should enter another blueprint. Adding these criteria can also be useful for testing out a new blueprint on a live system, because you can add in test conditions so that way only certain records that you want to be testing it out on actually enter the blueprint, and you don't disturb everyone's work before you're ready to fully deploy it and push it live to everyone on your org. Just like with workflows, each blueprint is tied to only one module in your system. For example, in CRM, if you create a blueprint that's based off of deals, then it won't let you structure how customer information gets added to your system because that's stored in a separate module. To deal with situations like this, you can try out the Command Center feature, which lets you build journeys that touch multiple modules or multiple different types of records. Next steps. Try having a meeting with your team where you talk about what your existing process is and maybe even map it out on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. After you've got it down, think about any places that you could improve by automating or simplifying your process. Once you've done that, try to create a blueprint and improve upon your existing process.